my project was, wait, is this working?
Did you hit the switch?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, it should go now.
Hello? Hello?
Give it a little tap or something. Show it a little love. Is there a green light on it at all?
Yeah, there's a green light.
Okay. Then we hope.
That's weird. Okay, so I guess this is useless. So for my SYP, I did a project on the applications of shape memory alloys in aircraft flight control surfaces. Now, I'll go through what each of those things are just one by one. So first, a little intro. So behind me is an image of the 1903 Wright Flyer. This was the first successful powered aircraft to ever take flight. It flew on December 17th off the Kill Devil Hills in North Carolina. It flew 120 feet in 12 seconds, which means a combined speed of around 7 miles an hour, just under actually. But 7 miles an hour might sound pretty slow, but you still need to have control over the aircraft. At 7 miles an hour, you will still crash, as Wilbur Wright proved on the first run. So how does one maintain control over an aircraft, even one that's flying at this kind of slow speed? The Wright brothers' answer was, in terms of roll at least, wing warping, which I'll explain in a second. This is the traditional control surface, the aileron. You'll see it up on the top area there. Aileron controls roll of the aircraft, which means turning side to side. The way it works is essentially, it's a hinged panel, a single solid hinged panel, mounted on the rear end of the wing, and when you pull it up, it will increase pressure on the top side of the wing. And then when you push it down, it will increase pressure on the bottom side of the wing. Now you alternate the high pressure and low pressure on each side of the wing to actually turn the aircraft. And this is the modern control surface. It's preferred by aircraft designers all around the world, essentially, simply because of the issues with wing warping, which is what the Wright brothers originally used. Now, wing warping, this is an image of the patent that the Wright brothers filed. Wing warping, rather than having a solid hinged panel, you will have an entire flexible wing. The wing itself will be bending and torsioning itself to provide the aerodynamic forces that are required to turn the aircraft. Theoretically, this is more efficient than the jointed solid panel kind of design of a traditional aileron, mainly because there are no gaps between the panels. It's a single surface, so there's no space for air to flow in between the two sides of the wing. And there's also fewer, obstructions for the airflow, like hinges and like separate planks and whatever. However, it's outdated because at high speeds, aircraft designers quickly discovered that a flexible wing would lend itself to violent oscillations and such things, which are not good when you're flying. It would also, sometimes when you turn the control stick one direction, you would involuntarily just flip the aircraft in the opposite direction because the forces that you put on the wing will bend the entire wing in the opposite direction, and you will actually get a counteracting tap effect on the wing, which obviously when you're flying, it's not the best idea. So wing warping is more efficient, so in certain aspects it's ideal to have comparatively, when compared to an aileron, excuse me. So the modern answer to this question of wing warping or traditional ailerons, or the modern answer that's being researched by mainly NASA actually, is what's called wing morphing. So behind me is an image of the X-53. It's a modified F-A-18. NASA designed this aircraft around what's called an active aeroelastic wing, which is one method of achieving wing morphing, which is essentially just computer-controlled wing warping. There are fewer issues with stability when you control it with a computer. Essentially, the aircraft will take measurements from sensors at several thousand times a second and make adjustments accordingly. There's improved efficiency, as I explained earlier, with the wing warping because it's a single large smooth surface. This X-53 with the active aeroelastic wing, it uses a very flexible wing as its sort of base, but it uses multiple traditional surfaces. So just smaller, essentially they look almost like smaller ailerons flaps. Those are used as what's called aerodynamic tabs, which means that they will use those small control surfaces to exert force on the entire wing to manipulate the, So they will exert force on the entire wing to manipulate the angle of the whole wing, which will have a greater effect than the small aerodynamic tabs. And these small surfaces flex the entire wing portion, which will then turn the aircraft or whatever. The X-53, it has shown that it's more efficient at high speeds and low speeds. It is lighter because it's mechanically simpler, and there's lower strains in lower strain maneuvers. So when you're turning slowly, there's reduced drag, and in higher strain maneuvers, there's reduced air load, so reduced aerodynamic forces on the wing, which could destroy it. And it also enables for more efficient designs of wings because of its design. And there are actually also alternative methods of achieving wing morphing. So the AAW, active air elastic wing, it relies on traditional control surfaces. So it still uses hydraulics, it still uses the surfaces that you'll see in commercial aircraft around the world. However, there are alternatives to this. It's essentially, so you can use two different technologies to also achieve wing morphing. One is shape memory alloys, which I study, and the other is piezoelectric chips. Piezoelectric chips are essentially small electronic components that once you apply voltage to them, they'll bend to a certain degree. Piezoelectric chips are cheaper, and they can double as sensors because when they bend, an electric current will also go through. It works both ways. But they're also fast. However, they're weaker and they can take less strain. Shape memory alloys have an advantage in that even though they're expensive, they can take enormous strains and they can put out a large amount of force. And they're also more flexible in terms of the shape you can make. Piezoelectric chips only have 1 degree of motion. So now I'll explain shape memory alloys. So the shape memory alloy which I studied was nitinol, which stands for Nickel Titanium Naval Ordnance Laboratory. Nickel titanium, it's an alloy of the two metals, and it's about 50-50 of each element. Nickel titanium shows what's called martensitic transformation, and that's what gives us a shape memory. Shape memory essentially means that you can set it to a certain shape, and you can deform it however you like. Once you heat it up again, it will reset back to that particular shape. Martensitic transformation essentially describes how this process works. So there are actually two crystal structures within the nitinol. One is what's called an austenite, which is the quote parent form, and it's a cubic crystal structure. It's on the left right there. And then the other is a martensite, or daughter form. It's a more complex, slightly more complex geometric shape. But essentially, the only thing you really need to know is this thermal hysteresis means that it can change between either shape or either crystal structure based upon its temperature. So it's under its austenite form, that's the shape that you set it to. So you heat it up to a certain degree, and then you set it to that particular shape. The martensite is at lower temperature, say room temperature. You'll be able to deform the metal however much you want. But then once you heat it up again, it'll snap immediately back to the austenite form, which will mean that you can exert a force using that motion, where it strains against whatever you hold it back with. This metal is kind of crazy. It has shape memory and it's super elastic, but it already has found many uses in the modern world. So there will be bendable glasses frames. Some people will have glasses that you can just twist them however much you want. They're already on the market, and these glasses they'll strain, but then the moment you release that strain, they will actually revert back to their original shape, which means they're very reliable and they're not going to break on you easily. And that's because the austenite form is actually active at room temperature, which means that essentially when you bend it out of shape, it will just immediately go back because it wants to hold a certain crystal structure within it. They're used in medical stents, which is the image that's the top left right there. Medical stents, they put them into your body and whatever, and they hold open arteries to prevent blood clots. And they're also used in nitinol heat engines, where they take advantage of venting to generate energy off of differences in heat. However, the ones that my use was most similar to were the artificial muscles. You'll see two images up here. One on the top is the mesh worm, which was developed by MIT. You can hammer this thing, you can step on it, but in essence, it just by a series of controlled contractions along its body, it will actually move along the ground pretty much no matter what you do to it. And the bottom there is a lobster robot that's being developed by the Navy to detonate underwater mines. The way that you actuate it is through joule heating, which means that you put an electric current through it and it'll heat up. Radiators and stuff like that, they all use joule heating to heat up. So it means the amount that it heats up is proportional to the resistance, or the resistance multiplied by the current squared, which is important. I'll get back to that later. So back to the wing morphing. There are many potential ways in which shape memory alloys might be used in wings, but in this specific case, I'm studying in the ailerons through wing warping or wing morphing. So they're flexible. They're much more flexible and can take higher strains than piezoelectric chips, which means that in a system that relies on flexibility, it's very important. And they can exert a huge amount of pressure, and they retain the benefits, the original benefits of wing warping, while with computer control, you lose the instability that was originally in the system. There are, however, also potential drawbacks that I discovered when I built this system on my own. The drawbacks the actuation is a lot slower than you would find in something like a piezoelectric chip. When you apply current through it, it heats up, but the rate at which it heats up determines the rate at which it can move back and forth. And in something of small scale, it's rather slow because of the power requirement, the voltage that's required, and the fact that in a small RC plane like the one that I built, the voltage is not actually high enough to, or it is high enough, but it's not high enough to actuate it quickly enough for you to make rapid control movements. And then there's a reason why I put the cube square law. Cube square law essentially says that when you say double something in length, if you have a three-dimensional object and you double it in length, the volume will actually go up by the cube because of the way that volume works compared to length. And this is important because when you cube the volume, the inertia also increases by the cube. So in something as small scale as I built, which is like a small foam RC plane that has 1.5 meter wingspan, it's not the forces that you exert are not much of an issue because it's so light. There's such little inertia, you can control it quite easily. But in something larger scale, say something the size of a Boeing 747, the amount of inertia and the amount of force that the nitinol will have to exert increases drastically. And so because of that, the amount of force that the nitinol has to put out, sorry, did I already say that? The amount of force that the nitinol has to put out increases drastically. And so the amount of current that has to go through the nitinol will also have to increase. And that means that, in essence, it will have large power requirement to actually turn that. I mean, this is a pretty small issue in terms of the potential uses because there are already systems which can put out a large amount of electrical power that have already been developed, but they're just not widely available yet because they're mainly in labs. So because of advancing technology, this can only be implemented quite some time in the future. So the future of aviation in terms of and its relationship to nitinol so as you can see in this image, the shape memory alloys are not just restricted to wing warping. Piezoelectric chips can achieve that. Active aeroelastic wing can achieve that. However, in my research, I also discovered that there are designs being built right now where the entire aircraft's shape can be manipulated. So you'll see a higher speed kind of configuration in the bottom left, or slower speed on the right. This is by the way, animation by NASA. But so this kind of design can pretty much only be achieved through shape memory alloys right now, and it gives aircraft designers a whole new level of flexibility in terms of design, not just in terms of wing morphing or wing warping, but also in terms of changing the entire shape of the aircraft. And the future of night and all is not just restricted to the wing warping, and it's